Tailgate. This is David Dom. This is where we talk about real life's issues, the problems, the challenges, the opportunities. We talk about them in real ways. Having sat in your seat, having been an agronomist and a salesperson for 20 plus years, we talk about real ways that absolutely will work to give you real success. And you clicked on this podcast because you're saying, yeah, how do I handle a customer that's upset? What do I do when a customer says, why don't you have that spread yet? Why don't you have that sprayed yet? When the blank are you guys going to get me that seed that I ordered? I planted your stuff and it didn't come up like I expected, and everybody else's looks great and my stand looks like you know what. What do I do? Well, we're gonna get you through that, and we're gonna provide you a number of skills for you to use. You might want to grab your all-terrain spiral that I've provided so many of you. You're gonna write conflict management on that page. You're gonna take one of those tabs that I've given you. You're gonna write conflict management on that. If you don't have those things, grab yourself your own notebook and a pen and a pencil. You're gonna want to write these things down. If you're driving, great opportunity for you to listen and then give yourself another opportunity to re-listen this so you can take notes. But this is a big time podcast. And the reason why it's big time is I'm going to give you some information that's going to blow your mind. The University of North Carolina recently did a survey of ag salespeople and how they work through what I call challenging situations with farmers. And can I say the word incivility? Incivility. Have you noticed that over the last number of years, 5, 10, those of you that are in my era, say 30 years, have you noticed how much more escalated some of these conversations or challenges from customers are getting? There's a lot more incivility, a lot less patience, higher demands, use of 4-letter words, threats. Yeah, it's all on the rise. And North Carolina, University of North Carolina said, well, what percent of an agronomist or salesperson time after one of these incidents that doesn't end well, what percent of the time do they spend time worrying about it? 53%. Over the next 7 days after one of these conversations with an upset farmer that doesn't go well, you spend almost half of your time thinking about it. And if I'm thinking about all that stuff, I'm not able to be my best. 37% of the ag salespeople said that their commitment to the organization actually declines after they have one of these tough situations arise. And why they say their commitment lowers is they go, I don't want to get in that situation again. I'm going to avoid it. Or they're upset with maybe a department or someone else in their company. They feel like dropped the ball, so why should I care? 12% said that they want to change jobs or roles. They don't want to ever get in that situation again. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. And what you want to know is how can you handle that situation a little bit differently. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do on this podcast. I'm going to give you my very best. You're going to want to reflect on it. You're going to want to practice it. But I'm going to give you some things that can be very, very helpful. And we're going to talk about the A, the B, the C, and the D's. The A, B, C's, and let's add D, huh? Yeah, the acronym that we're going to have you write down is A, B, C, and D. And I'm going to give you what that acronym stands for, and then we're going to go into each one. So the A stands for approach, the approach that we take on the call. And it's really, really important how we approach the call. And the first thing I want you to do is we're going to start working on you first. We're going to talk about you. You ever notice that, like in marriages or in relationships, when a problem arises, who do we want to blame? We want to blame our partner. We want to say, well, if they got better at that, or if they did this, I wouldn't have had to get upset. Or if they'd improve that area of their life, then I'd be happier. Let me share something with you. Any problem, any challenge in your life, don't blame someone else first. Look at yourself first. Why are you blaming the other person? Why are you unhappy? See, you can't fix someone else until you fixed yourself. You can't, quote unquote, fix someone else before you've looked at yourself, understand your gaps, understand who you want to be, before you can ever help be a better person to someone else. You know, the approach that I want you to take on any call, and sometimes those calls, both in person or over the phone or text, they happen pretty goddamn quick, don't they? And the reason why they're happening quicker than they ever have is the speed of agriculture. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I asked him, I said, did you help on the farm when you were growing up? And he said, yeah, 35 years ago. Dad put me on our 4020, a 60-horse tractor with a 12-foot disc, and you know, I went about 4 miles an hour. Life was pretty slow. And if I was going to have a problem, I could just idle it down and kind of press into the clutch and brake, and I could get it stopped. He goes, now my son, who's 12, he's helping me on the farm, driving our 550-horse tractor with a 60-foot field cultivator 9 miles an hour. See, life is happening a lot faster. Expectations have risen because we want our computers, we want our internet connection to run faster. We want the line in the store to be short. When we look around and there are lines and there's not someone in those checkout lines helping us at the grocery store, we sometimes get upset, we sometimes get frustrated. Farmers expect a lot, and they should. There's a lot of demands on their time. They're feeling the pressure with lower commodity prices. They're being challenged at home with maybe a spouse that has lost his or her job. Kids that have been home for 2 months. There's a lot of emotions. You can't get emotional when someone points the finger at you or your company. Your approach is really important. Write this down. I need to stay strong. I need to believe in me. And I want the customer and us to come to a win-win situation. I'm not going to compete with the customer. See, so many times it's our willingness in our own mind that we want to compete. We want to show the customer who is right and who is wrong. We don't want to be blamed. We'll blame someone else. Your approach is extremely important. Now, I want you to write this down. Anytime a customer begins to challenge you, is upset, I want you to stay silent. I want you to listen. And I want you to let the customer know, especially if you're on the phone, that I'm glad that you called. I want you to share with me how you're feeling and what has happened. And you're going to hear a lot of silence on the phone from me because I'm listening. If you're with them and in person, how you're going to show them that you're listening is you're going to say, tell me more. And I want your eyes to connect with them, not down, not off to the side. I don't want you to be distracted. I want you to look right at them. And I want you to tilt your head about 20 to 30 degrees to the side. Well, David, why is that? Well, you ever notice that they say when a dog is really barking and you can see they're kind of confrontational, that you shouldn't look at them directly in the eye? Well, in this case, we want you to look in the eye of the farmer, but we want you to tilt your head. Tilting the head doesn't look confrontational. When you stand there with your arms crossed and you're looking at them with a stern face, that can look confrontational. Your approach matters. Now, your approach to not doing some things is also important. Let me give you some blaming statements to avoid. I know that you never say these, and when I go through them, you're going to say, David, I would never do that. Well, really? As I'm giving you these blaming statements, Reflect on, have I ever said this to my spouse? Have I ever said this to a family member? If you can say these things to a family member, you're probably able to say these things to a customer when you're upset. If you just told me sooner, you're not listening to me, and I can't help you if you're not listening to me. You're not making any sense. You got to slow down. I know you've never said this to a loved one. You never. You're always. This is a total waste of time. You don't want to say those things early on with a customer. I can't trust you. You always want things your way. Now, why these things come up and why we might say these things is we want to compete with the customer. We want to win. And if you're an agronomist or a salesperson that has the what I call win at any cost piece of DNA in your body, the approach stage is very hard for you. You need to stay quiet. You need to stay calm. Your approach is absolutely going to matter. Now, I'm just going to give you some what I call one-offs or tips or tricks. When you're working with the hothead customer, when you're working with the angry customer, the space that you have between them and you matters. The amount of silence or the time of silence matters. When someone is really hot and really heated up, and they may be saying things that are coming out of their mouth that are really tough to hear, we need you to stay calm. We need you to not get red-faced. And we need you to really, inside your mind, say, you know what? I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to remain professional. I'm going to be the adult in the room. Can you do these things? It's the A. It's the approach. It is the approach. You know, the approach stage is also the place where we do a lot of listening. And your ability to listen is going to be critical. And you need to tell yourself that you're going to listen. The second thing you need to do is you need to listen for facts, and you really need to look for their feelings. They may be feeling like other people are getting stuff and they're not. They may be feeling like you're doing something to hurt them. There's going to be lots of feelings, and I want you to really, really become curious about where the feelings are coming from and really be listening for the facts. The third thing that you need to do when you're listening, this is really hard, is I want you to suspend judgment, and I want you to suspend analysis. Have you ever noticed how quick we are to judge, how quick we are to this is how I'm going to solve it, while someone else is telling us their problem or issue? This is how we need to approach the situation in a calm way, and why we need to suspend judgment and analysis. And the fourth thing, write this down. We need to restate what they tell us. We need to restate what they told us. And if we know that we're going to restate what they told us, that means we got to be really good. We got to be really good at listening. We got to be really good at listening. Now let's move into the B. Yeah, A, B, and B stands for build. And the build stage is where we're going to ask lots of questions. And let me just give you some that might just be some things that can really help you. And under the build stage is, you can use words like, tell me more about this. Tell me how long you felt this way. I really want to hear your feelings. I really want to hear your opinion. Help me understand more. What did you mean when you said blank? What did you mean when you said blank? Let's use their first name. Why would we want to use their first name? It connects. You know, a lot of us that, might be a little bit older might remember our mom or dad, but a lot of times our moms would say, David Edwin, your first and middle name. And it got our attention. And when we use the first name of our customer when they're upset, it sometimes gets their attention. It actually calms them down. Jerry, I hear you. Cindy, I hear you. Bob, could you give me an example of this? I like to reframe what they've told us. And when we reframe it or restate it, some of the best phrases you can use is, it sounds like you're saying, Joe, that we missed the mark here. Is that what you're telling me? When we build, we're actually building trust. And that's what the build stage is all about. It's building trust. How can you fix anything when trust is broken? Think about what I just said. You can't fix your marriage. You can't fix the relationship. You can't fix the problem when trust is broken. We got to rebuild trust. And so what we're doing in the B stage is we're building trust. And we're building trust by listening, asking questions, slowing it down. If you think about a roller coaster, I want you to picture a roller coaster right now that you maybe were in recently or even when you were little. And you first get in it, they put those bars down, usually have a seat belt, and it starts pretty slow. And generally early on, you kind of work your way up that big hill, don't you? Can you feel it? It's kind of herking and jerking, but you're going pretty slow. And then you get to the top and you just know what's going to happen next. And then it happens. The bottom drops out. You see, when someone's angry, when they're frustrated, when they're really hot, the worst time to try to solve, the worst time to jump in with, here's what we're going to do, is when the bottom's dropping out, when things are going really fast. And so what I want you to do, and what you need to do, is you need to slow down. And we got to slow them down by our approach and building trust. Now, let's go to the C stage. And the C stage is where we clarify. Is where we really clarify their perceptions. We clarify what the exact situation is. We eliminate any misunderstandings because, oh, by the way, sometimes there's misunderstanding. You told me I was going to be first in line. Now, what I did tell you is that we were going to be on the early side. I don't recall saying we were going to be first in line, but you took it that way. Let's talk about that. So the clarifying stage, and if you'll write this down, is where we really clarify any what I call misunderstandings that might be there. And some words that you can use there is how would you describe the current situation is on the farm, because we haven't gotten there yet. Help me understand what we're dealing with right now. How has this impacted your ability to plant? How has this impacted, and describe to me how this has impacted our priorities on your farm, which fields we were going to go first and then last. How does this have to be adjusted now because we're in this situation? Would you describe to me how you see it? Here's a big one. Put a star by this one. Listen first, then write. Are we starting at the same place in regards to assumptions? I want to understand what your assumptions are and were and how you're feeling. Because I want to make sure that those assumptions line up to how I see it as well. And then we're going to be able to solve it together better. So could I ask what you are assuming. What are your assumptions? Here's another one. When you hear this, you're going to go, David, I don't know if I could ever ask this. Well, here, before I give you the words, here's why it's important. You know, one of the best ways to help someone and to get someone past a situation is to get them to agree to something. Well, you're saying, David, there isn't much to agree on. Yeah, there is. Bob, what is this conflict not about? Are you upset with me? Is there something that you feel I haven't done where I dropped the ball? Are you still feeling good about the recommendation that I provided you? You see, when we start with something that they're likely going to agree with that it's not, it's a nice place when they hear themselves say, no, it's not, that's nothing you've done. Okay, that's good to know, because that tells me that you trust me and the ability to solve this now. Would you agree? Yeah, David, I agree. You know, under the clarifying stage, it really specifically defines the problem. And that problem might be that, you know, we're sitting here, we haven't got it spread, you're disappointed with the stand or whatever. Let's talk about specifically what you want to have happen. Let's talk about what you feel right now is the biggest challenge that we have to deal with and what you would like it to be. And see, when we ask people to clarify what they want it to look like, now we're able to solve it. And it allows us to brainstorm. It allows us to brainstorm all the options. We're not judging. We're talking about brainstorming, and how you might get them to brainstorm is in our transition to the next step. And that's the D. And that D really is what I call, we're going to use the words decide. We're going to decide what the answer, we're going to decide what the next step is. We're going to decide what you're going to do. We're going to decide what someone else in our company is going to do. And that is all about putting some options around the challenge. And how you might do that is, what options do you see that you would like us to consider or put on the table right now, Mr. or Mrs. Farmer? What if we were able to do this? I know that there's nothing I can do in regards to being 4 days late, but what if we were able to do this? Here's another one. What ideas do you have, Joe? Now, while they're sharing their ideas, what should you be doing? That's right, you're taking notes. Well, David, notes are hard for me. No, they're not. Notes aren't hard when you care about a situation. Notes aren't hard to take when you want to have a win situation for the farmer. Notes aren't hard to take when I want to build trust. And how do you build trust when you're not taking notes? Let me give you another one. Let me share with you what I'm going to do. Remember, we're deciding what we're going to do. Let me share with you what I'm going to do, and I would like your feedback. Let me share with you what we've talked about in regards to next steps, and I want and need us to be on the same page. Let's talk about how we're going to deal with this situation, how we're going to rectify this situation, what I'm going to do, and then down the road, I'd like to set up some time on how we can avoid this to never happen again, or how we could reduce it. The decision stage, the decide stage of the ABCD is where we bring options, where we ask them for options, where we decide on the next steps, where we decide in clearly how we're going to deal with this in the future. This is where we do it. Go ahead and write those words out. Do it. This is where we get it done. This is where we do what we say, and our do to say ratio has to be what? It has to be high. Now, I've given you a lot to think about. Let's do a quick review. We talk about the approach, the A, and how important it is. And that approach is your mindset, how you're going to show up, how you're going to listen, what you're going to do and not do, and what you're not going to say are really important in the approach stage. And we talked about how it's different on a phone call versus in person. You're going to want to look at your notes. I said that the approach stage is the most difficult stage. It's how we show up. But you want to know the good news? You get to decide how you're going to show up. The second stage is where we really begin to build. We really begin to build that trust. And I shared with you a number of questions that you can use that are going to be really, really helpful in regards to building trust and getting them to open up. We talked about tell me more about, and I want to hear your thoughts, and help me understand, and could you give me an example? That's where it all starts. And we can't rectify the problem until we've built back the trust. And you're saying, David, it's going to take some time. You're exactly right. It might take time. But what we don't want to do is to blame. What we don't want to do is say, well, I know it. We screwed it up. It's their fault over in operations. And boy, our delivery guys, I'm sure they screwed it up. It had nothing to do with me. That's not building trust. You get to decide how you're going to build trust. We got to clarify the issue, the C. We have to clarify what their perceptions are. We have to clarify, has priorities changed? How big is the problem now? We have to decide on options. And then we have to do it. A, B, C, D. These are tough days. Patience is thin. Margins are thin to in the red. COVID-19 has caused changes in home, community, faith, and sometimes you're the punching bag. This is an opportunity to build trust, to help a farmer, and to get better. You know, if I asked you to tell me the worst customer service you've ever had, you can remember that moment. You can remember the time where you sat online for an hour and a half, and when they finally answered the phone, they didn't want to listen. They passed the buck. There's nothing we can do, or couldn't help you with the problem. They might have blamed you. Well, there's nothing we can do. That's on your end. And I bet you did less business or quit doing business with them, didn't you? Now I want you to think of the time that you've had a problem or something with a service or product, and you picked up the phone and you called them and you were upset. God dang it, we got it. You might even use some words or maybe your tonality, and you were really frustrated. And that person on the phone or on the other end of the counter said, I'm so glad that you came in. I'm so glad that you called me, and I know that you're disappointed, and I want to help you. And so what I'm going to do is I just want to listen first. Would you mind? And then they restated what your issue was. They said, what I'm hearing is, David, is that your remote on your TV doesn't work. Is that right? That's exactly right. I think we're able to help you here, but I'm going to need to ask some questions. And So can I ask you a few questions? And they began to build trust. And they clarified the issue. And then we decided on what the next steps were going to be, and they did it. You know, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of your career, at the end of our lives, you're probably not going to be thinking about this individual situation. But what you will be saying is how you treated others, how you did your best, how you listened, how you wanted it and tried to always solve problems and do the right thing, and how you left things better than they were before you. And you get that opportunity to leave that lasting impression, to leave that legacy by handling the issues, the problems, the challenges, the frustrations, the disappointments, the I dropped the ball, the we dropped the ball moments, the we screwed up moments. Because as my father told me, he said, David, you know, most farmers farm 40 plus years or longer, at least. My dad's 81, still farming. So he's put in nearly 65 crops in his life. And he said, you know, if you farm long enough, no matter who you work with, you're going to have a problem. And what he said is what I look for is how the people that I work with are going to help me solve the problem. Dads are pretty smart, aren't they? I hope today I've brought you some things that are going to allow you to show up differently, to show up more professionally, to show up in a way that you can be proud and others can be proud that you were there. You know, the story of the builder I think is very appropriate as we close our time together. And I'd like you to really listen to these words. You know, I saw a group of men in my hometown. I saw a group of men and women in my hometown tearing a building down. With a heave and a hoe and a mighty yell, they swung the beam, and the sidewall fell. I went over to the foreman and I asked him, are these men and women skilled, the kind you would hire if you wanted to build? And he shrugged his shoulders and shook his head and said, well, no, for common labor is all I need, for I can tear down in a day or two what it took a builder 10 years to do. I asked myself as I walked away, which of these roles do I want to play? Am I the type that carefully builds so that people are glad that I was here? Or am I the type that makes my way around the country thinking of only myself, wandering around stepping on others, and then wondering if they were glad that I was here? You have an opportunity to show up professionally. And I ask that you think about the A, the B, the C, and the D, and how you're going to approach the challenges that are going to rise this year. For All Terrain and David Don.